This round can go ahead and begin. Thank you for your patience.
All right, folks. Good morning. And as you heard, we just received the message to start. So let's call the case of the estates of Genesis Petrillo versus Peony Estates and Harper Martini. My name is Judge Vic Davenigam. You can call me Judge or Judge Vic. Scoring judges, please look to the two buttons on the lower left of your screen. Remember to keep your audio and video off unless asked to do otherwise. And you should also have your video set to hide all non-video participants. This means only the people on the screen right now should be the advocates and myself. Will the attorneys go ahead and announce their names and who they're representing?
Yes, Your Honor. Cooper Attic for the plaintiff. I, along with my co-counsel, Abigail Frankie.
Good morning, Your Honor.
And Beau Marlette.
Good morning, Your Honor.
We'll be representing the plaintiff, as I mentioned, the estate of Genesis Petrillo.
And the defense?
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Josiana Wardy, and I, alongside with my co-counsels, Nicholas Hoffman.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Morning.
And Gage Jones.
Good. Mr. Jones, could you speak up again? I think your audio is off. I'm not able to get your audio.
Alongside my co-counsel, Mr. Gage Jones, we'll be representing the defendant, Harper Martini, in today's trial.
Excellent. And is the plaintiff ready to proceed?
A few pretrial matters, Your Honor.
All right.
To start, I just want to make sure that you have a copy of the Midlands Rules of Evidence, case law, stipulations, and other relevant documents for today's case.
I have been provided that information.
Yes, Your Honor. And the plaintiff would like to invoke Rule 603, the constructive swearing in of all witnesses.
Are all witnesses present? And
I believe so.
all right. At this time, if you'll raise your right hands, do you swear the testimony you're about to give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
The plaintiff would also like to invoke Rule 615, the constructive sequestration of all witnesses, barring party representatives.
And what that is commonly referred to as the rule. The rule has been invoked, and what that means is all witnesses from this point on are not allowed to confer amongst themselves or with anyone else other than counsel in this case. That includes before and even after you testify. You're not allowed to discuss your testimony with anyone other than the attorneys involved. Are there any questions about the rule being invoked?
No, Your Honor, but defense would like to designate Harper Martini as our party representative.
And the plaintiff will have no party representative today, Your Honor.
All right, Ms. Martini, you will be the representative of the party. You will be allowed to participate with counsel.
Now, Your Honor, can we constructively assume that all sustained objections are stricken?
No. If you want something struck from the record, it needs to be requested. But objections will be ruled upon. And outside of that, anything additional will need to be requested.
Yes, Your Honor. And then the plaintiff would like to point your attention to the pretrial order in today's case. Now, that pretrial order states, and I'll give you a moment to pull it up if you want, Your Honor.
Thank you. And okay.
Now, I just want to point Your Honor's attention to the fact that today's trial will be bifurcated, meaning that it's been previously ruled that today's trial will only deal with liability and not damages.
That's my understanding.
And with that, the plaintiff is ready to proceed to opening statements.
Any pretrial matters from the defense?
Yes, Your Honor. Now, Your Honor, it's commonly assumed in this jurisdiction that all objections are constructively heard outside of the earshot of the jury. May we assume the same in your court?
That's correct.
And Your Honor, may all exhibits displayed on the screen be also constructively viewed outside of this side of the jury until they are admitted into evidence?
That would be correct as well.
With that, Your Honor, defense is ready for trial.
All right. If the plaintiff would like to proceed, we'll hear opening statements from each party. Make sure, please, that scoring judges are on speaker view. And attorneys, please remember to mute your audio when other attorneys are speaking. Thank you, and the plaintiff, you may proceed.
Yes, Your Honor. May it please the court. I will make you disappear. Members of the jury, we are here today because Harper Martini did exactly that. She made Genesis Petrillo disappear by taking his life. All Genesis wanted to do was get married to the love of his life, Casey Soto, Harper Martini's daughter. But the defendant could not stand the idea of her only daughter being married to someone who she hated, someone who she considered a pest, and someone who she was determined to make disappear. All Genesis wanted to do was get married to the love of his life at the winery where they first laid eyes on each other. Winery called Rosie and Pedro. Then they were going to get married and live out the rest of their lives together in France. But Harper Martini wouldn't have that. She insisted that the wedding be held at her winery so she could have control over every aspect of the wedding. The only issue was Genesis. The pair began to fight about the table settings, about the floral arrangements, about how Casey should live her life. Members of the jury, you will hear today that these fights escalated and escalated until there was little hope of anything being resolved. With every snide comment, with every angry remark, the pair escalated their tensions until it hit a breaking point. You will hear today that that breaking point was the rehearsal dinner, the night before the wedding on June 7th, 2019, where Harper Martini looked at Genesis Petrillo and told him, I will make you disappear. Soon enough, as the toast rolled around, Harper presented Genesis with a special bottle of Cara wine. But what Genesis didn't know was that the special ingredient was pesticides. Pesticides that were deadly, and pesticides that were there because of that defendant's actions. And that is why the plaintiff has filed a claim of battery against the defendant, Ms. Harper Martini. As the plaintiff, we bear the burden of proof. We have to meet this burden by preponderance of the evidence, or simply that it's more likely than not that Harper Martini intentionally intended to harm Genesis Petrillo by mixing wine with pesticides. And as a result, Genesis Petrillo died. In order to meet our burden, we'll be calling 3 witnesses to the stand. First, you'll hear from Miss Angel Rodriguez, who is a member of the wedding party and who was at the rehearsal dinner. You'll hear from her about how high the tensions were between Genesis and Harper and all of the fights they had, including the fight they had on June 7th, 2019, the night of the rehearsal dinner, when Harper said, I will make you disappear. She will also tell you that Genesis, and only Genesis, drank from that bottle of Cara wine. The bottle of Cara wine that Miss Martini gave to our next witness, Sam Arnold, to give to Mr. Petrillo. Sam Arnold was the caterer for the wedding. Harper Martini told him that that bottle of wine should only go to Genesis, and that Genesis should drink it when he was alone. You will also hear from Sam Arnold about the constant conflicts between the two, and how on the night of the rehearsal dinner, upon seeing a can of pesticides in the kitchen and asking the defendant what it was about, Harper told him to kill pests like Genesis. Then later that night, Genesis ended up in the hospital, where he met Dr. Jameen Kwan, who you'll hear from last. Dr. Kwan is an emergency room physician with specializations in toxicology. Dr. Kwan will tell you that Genesis Petrillo was suffering from organophosphates, or pesticide poisoning. Mr. Petrillo's symptoms were in line with this poisoning. Dr. Kwan also ran additional tests on Genesis's body and stomach contents that confirmed that Genesis had been poisoned by pesticides. Members of the jury, Harper promised to make Genesis Petrillo disappear, and she made good on that promise. And that is why, at the end of today's trial, we will ask you to find the only just verdict: to find Harper Martini liable for battery. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Would the defense like to give an opening at this time or want to reserve the opening?
Yes, Your Honor, we'll be proceeding with opening right now.
You may proceed.
May it please the court. Harper Martini had everything to lose and nothing to gain. Ms. Frankie just came up here and told you a story of intrigue, secrets, betrayal. But I want you to listen to what the plaintiff actually wants you to believe. Now, you're going to hear a lot of mean words, a lot of out of context quotes. In fact, Ms. Frankie just told you a bunch of them. And maybe a little bit of circumstantial evidence. But what you're never going to hear is any evidence that Miss Martini killed anyone. Because Harper Martini had everything to lose and nothing to gain. So let's talk about the real story of today's trial. Miss Martini is a loving mother who wants nothing but the best for her daughter, Casey Soto. You'll hear how Miss Martini plays a large role in the wedding between Mr. Petrillo and her daughter, Casey Soto. You'll hear how Miss Martini actually tries to make peace with Mr. Petrillo and offers him a customized bottle of wine accompanied by a beautiful toast. Members of the jury, that is when a tragedy occurs. We know now that that wine bottle was contaminated with pesticide. And when Mr. Petrillo drank it, he fell ill, passed away. But this is where the plaintiff's story shifts from fact to fiction. You're going to hear how the plaintiff's story simply could not have happened. The bottle would have had to have been opened, poisoned, and then resealed through a long and complicated process. You'll hear how it's simply impossible that anybody could have poisoned this wine bottle, resealed it, covered their tracks, and gotten back to the wedding rehearsal without anyone noticing. Instead, you'll hear how it's much more likely that this was an accidental contamination that just occurred during the wine production process. Members of the jury, the plaintiff has brought a claim of battery today, and because they brought that claim, they hold the burden of proof. We don't have to prove anything. That burden starts, stops, and stays with them. Their burden requires that they prove their case by a preponderance of the evidence. And that just means more likely than not. They're going to try to convince you that that's an easy task. Members of the jury, they have to show that their story is more likely than all other alternatives combined. Now, to prove battery, they have to show three things. One, that Miss Martini poisoned a bottle of wine. Two, that she did so with the intent to harm Genesis Petrillo. And three, that she actually did harm Genesis Petrillo. Members of the jury, we anticipate that by the end of this trial, they will be unable to prove any of these elements. Members of the jury, listen to their story. They're trying to convince you that Miss Martini performed an impossible task in the name of sacrificing her business, her child, her life as she knew it. All over some mean words? Members of the jury, look through the out of context quotes, look through the mean words, look through those little tiny pieces of circumstantial evidence. Members of the jury, Harper Martini had everything to lose and nothing to gain. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. I'm going to remind the participants and the scoring judges at this point to switch to gallery view so that you'll be able to see the attorneys as well as the witnesses. Would the plaintiff call their first witness?
Yes, Your Honor. The plaintiff calls Miss Angel Rodriguez to the stand.
All right, Ms. Rodriguez, you've been previously sworn. You may proceed.
Please introduce yourself to the court.
Good afternoon. My name is Angel Rodriguez.
Ms. Rodriguez, what do you do for a living?
I'm a kindergarten teacher for the very lively students of Rapid River Valley Elementary, right here in Midlands.
How are you related to today's case?
Genesis was one of my closest friends. I was also the one who called 911 for him when he got sick, and to tell my other closest friend, Casey, his fiance, about his passing. It's one of the hardest things I've ever had to do.
Ms. Rodriguez, how did you become friends with Genesis Petrillo?
I met Genesis and Casey in 2016 through a mutual friend. When I tell you the three of us clicked right away, it was like I knew them my entire life. They were such a sweet couple. And I mean, the most genuine people I've met. Genesis could just make anyone feel so welcomed and important.
Ms. Rodriguez, what was Genesis and Casey's relationship like?
Those two were inseparable. You know what I mean? When they told me they were getting married, I was thrilled for them. I just wish I could have saw the two of them live their life together.
Ms. Rodriguez, were you at the wedding rehearsal dinner on June 7th, 2019?
Yes, I was there.
Can you walk me through what happened that day?
I was with Genesis for the majority of the night. He even sat next to me instead of the sweetheart table, you know, where all the important people sit, because of a fight him and Casey had.
Well, were you able to find out what this fight was about?
Yeah. Actually, it was more of a fight he had with Harper earlier that day. Harper told Genesis that he should just leave and save this family the headache.
Objection, Your Honor. At this time, I must object to the hearsay statements of Genesis Petrillo. While Mr. Petrillo is relaying things that Miss Martini said, Mr. Petrillo saying that these statements were things that Ms. Martini said is inadmissible hearsay?
Any response from the plaintiff?
Yes, Your Honor. Although I don't believe any specific statement from Genesis Petrillo has been elicited during the witness's testimony, this goes towards affecting the listener and how Angel Rodriguez perceived Genesis Petrillo's condition that night. Genesis' statements about the fight that he had with Harper will inform Ms. Rodriguez about how Genesis was feeling, any bad blood between Harper and Genesis that night, and therefore goes to affect on the listener.
Objection sustained at this time. Don't go into any specific statements. I think you can elicit the testimony through other ways, or the effect of the testimony. You may proceed.
Your Honor, move to strike the offending testimony.
I don't believe any statements were given, but if they were given specific statements, those would be struck.
Yes, Your Honor.
Ms. Rodriguez, were there any other fights that you know of between Harper and Genesis that night?
Yes, I mean, they fought all the time, so I guess tonight wasn't any different, right? Well, Genesis was really concerned about these fights and confronted Harper about it. I saw Harper grab Genesis's arm and pull him into the hallway. I asked Genesis what happened, and he said, "Keep away from Harper."
Objection, Your Honor, to hearsay from Genesis Petrillo. Any statements made by Genesis Petrillo are out-of-court statements being used to prove the truth of the matter asserted and are therefore inadmissible in today's trial.
Your Honor, may I respond?
You may.
If I may proffer, Your Honor.
And you may.
The statement being elicited from Genesis is, "Keep away from Harper. I'm afraid that Harper is going to kill me if I'm not careful." This statement falls under 8033, an exception to hearsay, in that this is describing a current mental state of Genesis Petrillo. Genesis describes in the quote how she was afraid that Harper was going to kill her. This went towards Genesis's mental state at that time, and therefore is an exception to hearsay under Rule 8033.
Apologies.
I'm going to sustain the objection.
Yes, Your Honor.
Now, did you see Harper at any time else before the dinner?
Yes, I did. As I said, Harper and Genesis were fighting a lot, and you could just tell it was affecting Genesis.
Objection, Your Honor, to under Rule 701, improper opinion. This witness is delving into the mindset of Genesis Petrillo. We haven't heard any foundation that this is rationally based upon the witness's perception, and as such is an improper opinion under Rule 701.
That's overruled.
Yes, Your Honor.
Now, Ms. Rodriguez, I want to move on to the wedding rehearsal dinner itself. Was Mr. Petrillo drinking that day?
Yes, but not that much. I saw him take a sip of his champagne, but not more than that. I asked why he was taking it so slow. We would drink a lot together normally, and this was a rehearsal dinner for his wedding. It should have been a celebration, but he just shrugged me off. I could tell like something was wrong.
Well, what happened next, Ms. Rodriguez?
Speeches were next. Harper called Genesis a problem child and kept making mean jokes about him that not a single person would laugh at, especially not Genesis.
How did Genesis specifically react to this speech?
I mean, come on. Harper had just mocked him in front of all of his friends and closest family. How do you think he'd react? He was shaking under the table.
Ms. Rodriguez, were there any other speech or toasts given that night?
Yeah, around 10 p.m., Harper toasted to Genesis and gave him a bottle of Cara wine. Harper also gifted the rest of the wedding party with wine.
Well, Ms. Rodriguez, did you receive a bottle of that Cara wine?
No. I received a bottle of Horizon wine and saw that the rest of the party did as well. Nobody else had the Cara.
Would you recognize the label of this Cara wine if I showed it to you today?
Yeah, I would.
Your Honor, permission to screen share what has been pre-admitted as Exhibit 2B.
Permission granted.
Now, Mr. Rodriguez, is this the label that was on? Do you recognize what I just showed you?
Yes, this is the label from the car wine bottle.
And is this a fair and accurate depiction of that label?
I believe so, yes.
And is this the same label that was on the bottle that was given to Genesis on June 7th?
Same exact one.
Thank you, Ms. Rodriguez. Now, did you see Genesis actually drink that bottle of wine?
Yeah, he did. He offered it to everyone, but they all declined. I had one sip of it, but it tasted funny, to say the least. So I spit it out. I mean, I'm a wineaholic, you know, and that bottle didn't sit right with me.
Ms. Rodriguez, did Genesis drink a lot of the car wine?
Well, I've seen Genesis drink before, and trust me, he can outdrink me. Well, he could have outdrunk me on any day. He had a couple of glasses of wine from the bottle that Harper gave him, but knowing him, he was acting way too drunk from the amount he had had.
What do you mean by this, Ms. Rodriguez?
I'm Genesis. He just looked so much drunker than he should have been.
Objection, Your Honor. At this point, I must object to improper opinion. This is delving into the physical condition of Genesis Petrillo. This would require some specialized or technical knowledge in order to give a proper opinion. And as such, under Rule 701C, this disqualifies it as an opinion that a lay witness can give.
I'm going to overrule that objection. The witness has already talked about previous drinking experiences with the decedent in this case. I think she can give an opinion on what she's seen before compared to this night. That's overruled.
Yes, Your Honor.
Ms. Rodriguez, I'll re-ask the question. What do you mean by Genesis appeared too drunk for how much he was drinking?
This was the moment where things started to go downhill. Genesis was just looking way drunker than he should have been based off of what he drank. He even said that it was a feeling that he never felt before. God, I was so worried. Especially because I've seen him, you know, drink a whole bottle of wine and not even get a hangover. I wanted him to rest, but he wouldn't.
Ms. Rodriguez, did you see Genesis drink any other alcohol besides the Cara wine that night?
No. He ordered tequila shots for the rest of the group. You know, classic Genesis, trying to keep the party going. But I didn't see him drink any. I only saw him drink the Cara wine.
What happened next?
This is the point where Genesis completely tapped out. I didn't smell any alcohol on his breath, which caused me to worry a lot. I took him to his hotel room to rest.
What was Genesis' condition in the hotel room?
He got bad, and he got bad fast. It took me 30 minutes to get him up there. He couldn't stop throwing up. I would give him water, and he would immediately vomit it back out. I've never seen anyone get so bad so quick. He told me to call 911, so I did.
Ms. Rodriguez, what happened once EMS actually took Genesis to the hospital?
I don't really remember the ride there fully. The sirens were screaming, and I just held Genesis's hand. He fell into a coma, and the doctor told me that he was poisoned, and I had to tell Casey, so I went back.
What happened once you returned to the winery?
I rushed over to tell Casey, but before I got a chance to, I met up with Harper in the hallway. I hadn't even said anything to her before she said Genesis got poisoned? Oh no, we'll have to cancel the wedding. Go tell Casey. Casey needs to know.
Ms. Rodriguez, before you called 911, did you share your concerns with anybody else?
No, not a soul. I didn't tell a single person from the wedding. I didn't want them to worry unless, there was something to worry about.
Was anybody with you at the hospital?
No, it was just me. I was the only one with a Genesis.
Thank you, Ms. Rodriguez. No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examination, Your Honor.
Yes, you may proceed.
Ms. Rodriguez, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I want to actually talk about the wedding planning a little bit. Miss Martini planned most of the wedding, right?
She hired a wedding planner, Blair Osborne, but yeah, she had a pretty heavy hand in it.
And you'd agree it's normal for a mother to be involved in planning their child's wedding?
Yes, I would, except for under this circumstance, they already had their wedding planned out, so it's kind of weird that she wanted to take over.
Well, Casey was Harper's only daughter, right?
That's correct.
I actually want to talk about the wedding rehearsal. You actually saw Harper before it started, right?
Yes, I did.
You saw her carrying a canister of some kind, right?
Yes, I did.
You thought it might have been pesticides.
Well, it said pesticides right on it.
Now, you're not sure why Harper had that canister with her.
No, I just know that she was carrying it into the kitchen.
You're not sure if maybe she was going to take care of some roaches.
I mean, no, but she was carrying it to the kitchen.
Now, at the time, you weren't aware that Peony Estates actually had a pest problem, were you?
Yes, I was.
Well, you don't know what pesticide protocols Peony Estates follows in dealing with that.
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance.
Overruled.
Sorry, Ms. Rodriguez, I'll re-ask my question. You don't know what pesticide protocols Peony Estates follows in dealing with that, do you?
No, I'm a kindergarten teacher.
I actually want to take a step forward and talk about the dinner rehearsal itself. You mentioned that's when you saw Genesis receive that bottle of Carol wine?
That's correct.
Now, Ms. Rodriguez, you said something on direct that really caught my ear. You mentioned that Genesis offered everyone in the wedding party a drink, right?
The people that I saw, correct.
In fact, you took a drink yourself.
And then I spit it right out. Something wasn't right with it.
Exactly, you spit it out.
I couldn't swallow it.
But just to be clear, when Mr. Petrillo said those things, Harper Martini didn't come over and say, no one else can drink the wine.
No one else wanted to drink it.
But just to be clear, Harper Martini didn't stop anyone.
No, not that I know of. I mean, it would be kind of rude to take a gift from someone. It was toasted to Genesis.
Well, when you took that sip, Harper Martini didn't walk over and knock the glass out of your hand.
No, I don't think she was in the room.
Right, she wasn't making sure that no one else but Genesis drank that wine, was she?
Not at the moment. I mean, it was Genesis' gift.
I want to talk about what else you know about that Cara bottle of wine. You don't actually know where that bottle was stored before the wedding rehearsal.
No, just that Harper brought it out.
Right, you can't tell us if it was stored near some pesticides.
No, I can't.
You can't tell us if it had accidentally been contaminated with pesticides before the dinner rehearsal.
I mean, I don't work there. I just knew that wine, something was wrong with it.
Well, you actually did find out that there had been a pesticide spraying right before the wedding rehearsal, didn't you?
My friend Drew had told.
Hearsay.
Overruled.
Ms. Rodriguez, I'll re-ask the question. You actually found out that there had been a pesticide spraying right before the wedding rehearsal, didn't you?
My friend Drew had told me during the rehearsal, and he works there.
And that surprised you?
I mean, yeah, but I'm not an exterminator.
Right. You thought Harper should have actually hired a professional.
I mean, Like you said, though, I mean, I don't know the ins and outs. I thought so.
I want to talk about what else you think about Harper Martini. You think that Harper Martini is responsible for Genesis Petrio's death.
I do.
In fact, you've spent a lot of your free time trying to convince people of that.
I spend a lot of my free time trying to get my dead friend justice.
All right, you've talked to attorneys.
Of course.
You've talked to policemen.
Of course.
You've talked to activists of all sorts.
I guess you could say activists.
Trying to convince people that Harper Martini is responsible for Genesis Petrio's death.
Like I said, I want justice for my dead friend.
Ms. Rodriguez, you even blame Casey Soto, Genesis's fiance, for not admitting Miss Martini's responsibility.
I mean, I said some words that I shouldn't, but to me it was just so, I didn't know why he wouldn't admit it.
So just to be clear, you're disappointed with Casey Soto, Genesis's fiance, for not admitting Harper Martini's responsibility.
Disappointed, but understand, because it's her mother.
Just to be clear, that's a yes, you're disappointed with Casey Soto?
Objection, Your Honor. Asked and answered.
Overruled.
So
Yeah.
That's a yes, right?
Yes.
All right. Thanks so much for your time, Ms. Rodriguez. Your Honor, I pass the witness.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor. I just asked that my witness be allowed to step down.
Witness may step down. Your next witness, please.
Your Honor, at this time, we'd like to call Sam Arnold to the stand.
Mr. Arnold, you've been previously sworn in. You may proceed.
Can you please state your name for the court?
Call me Sam. Sam Arnold.
And Sam, why are you here today?
Well, I make the best bloody steak in Rapid River County. So I ended up in Peony Estates' kitchen at one point.
And how did you get into cooking?
Well, I got my start working for some of the very top kitchens in France. Soon after, I ran the show called Iron Chef. It was a solid 50 minutes of me yelling at stupid chefs that couldn't cook a steak if a cow sat on the grill right in front of them. It was amazing.
And what do you do for a living now?
Well, after a while, I decided I needed a little challenge in my life. So I started my own food service business in Rapid River Valley.
And how did you come into contact with Harper and Peony Estates?
Cooking's really just a hobby, but reality TV, man, the best part about running my own food service is I get to go around the country and film for my latest show, Hell's Winery. Harper was one of our favorite clients, and we even had a whole season dedicated to her establishment.
Now, Chef, how did you come to know Genesis and Casey?
Harper asked me to cater for Genesis and Casey's rehearsal and their wedding. So, I figured weddings are the perfect place to get my good food with her good wine and also a little drama involved with it.
How involved was Harper in the wedding process?
How involved? Harper had every little detail planned out for that wedding. But then again, so did Genesis. It was a bloodbath, and I got to witness the whole thing.
Objection, Your Honor. This witness characterized the event as a bloodbath, and yet this isn't within their knowledge as a witness under Rule 701. Mr. Arnold. Okay.
Now, Chef, how was Harper involved when it came to Genesis?
Well, all she did was just fight and fight over Casey and over every little thing about this wedding. From all the arguing they were doing and yelling, it seemed like they hated each other. Those two had more tension than a overcooked sirloin, yeah?
Were there any issues you had with preparing for the wedding?
Yeah, actually. One time they had the audacity to challenge my food and drink choice right in front of me.
And what was that?
Well, Harper handed me this bottle called Cara and said that it was specifically reserved for Genesis. They said that they were giving Genesis something special, something that would take care of their problems forever.
And Mr. Arnold, was that the last time that Harper talked to you about Genesis?
No. There was another time. I saw a bottle of bug off spray in the kitchen. I was up to my knees with this poison in my kitchen space. So I asked the fool what kind of idiot keeps pesticides in a bloody kitchen.
And what did she tell you?
Well, she was acting like she had nothing to lose by this. She said that it was to kill pests like Genesis and that they had something special for her, or him, sorry. And they said that they were just kidding after all, but who really knows in a place like Hell's Winery?
Now, the night of the rehearsal, did you end up giving Genesis that bottle of special wine?
Yeah, I did. I thought Harper was kidding, but in the end, who really knows, you know?
What do you mean?
Harper, she gave the bottle to me to give to Genesis and told me to make sure Genesis was alone when he drank that wine. I chalked it up in the moment to not wanting to share a good bottle of wine, but now I'm not so sure.
Then what happened?
Well, you know as much as I do. I got that super awful call the next morning that the poor man had already been killed.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Defense?
Hi, Mr. Arnold. I want to ask you a couple of questions about something that you said during your direct. So in November 2018, you remember seeing Harper go towards a employees only section of the winery.
Yeah.
And do you remember seeing Harper carrying something in her hands?
Yes, it was specifically bug off pesticide.
Right, and you followed Miss Martini to the kitchen.
Yes, I did.
And you saw her throw this pesticide into a corner of the kitchen.
Yeah. I mean, I am a top chef and I care about my kitchen space. Harper was acting like she had nothing to lose by having this pesticide in this kitchen.
Right, Mr. Arnold, you saw her throw this pesticide into a corner of the kitchen.
Yeah,
And you told Harper that this wasn't right.
I did.
You told her to move the pesticides to a better storage place.
Absolutely.
But Mr. Arnold, you don't know where Miss Martini moved these pesticides.
No, she just threw it in the corner of the room and moved on.
Mr. Arnold, didn't Miss Martini move these pesticides to a door marked employees only after you told her to move them?
Yeah, it was like maybe like a bottling area or something. I really don't know.
Right, Mr. Arnold, but you don't know within that area where she stored these pesticides.
No, I can't tell you specifics.
You don't know how Peony Estates stored its pesticides.
No, I'm just a chef.
Right. Mr. Arnold, you don't know if Peony Estates followed proper pesticide procedures at Peony Estates.
Like I said, my job is to make sure that the chefs are in line, not the wine owners.
Right, Mr. Arnold. Now I want to talk to you a little bit about the day of the rehearsal dinner. Now, you were actually in charge of giving out the bottles of wine.
Yeah, actually, Harper gave me this Cara bottle and told me to specifically give it to Genesis when she was alone. But then everyone else got a different bottle.
Right, Mr. Arnold, but you handled both Horizon bottles and Cara wine bottles, right?
Yep. Everybody in the room got one Horizon bottle, except for Genesis, who got Cara for some reason.
Mr. Arnold, you remember seeing this bottle before you handed it off to Genesis.
Yep, that's correct.
The label on the bottle was not broken.
No, it was intact.
It didn't look to be tampered with.
To the best of my knowledge, it was a perfectly good sealed bottle of wine.
Right, there were no Mars on the corkscrew.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't look at it specifically, but it looked like it was a solid bottle of wine.
Right, Mr. Arnold. And when you gave it to Genesis, Genesis didn't notice anything about the bottle being tampered with.
No, Genesis didn't notice any tampering on the bottle.
Right, Mr. Arnold. And no further questions. I pass the witness.
All right. Anything further from this witness?
No, Your Honor. I would just like to ask that my witness be allowed to step down.
You may step down, Mr. Arnold. Plaintiff's next witness?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the plaintiff calls Dr. Jameen Kwan to the stand.
Dr. Kwan has been previously sworn in. You may proceed.
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning. Please introduce yourself to the jury.
Hi, my name is Jameen Kwan.
What do you do for a living, Dr. Kwan?
I am an emergency room physician.
Where did you go to school?
Well, I received my Bachelor of Science in Biology from the Georgia Institute of Technology in 1993, then received my MD from the University of North Carolina Chapel Hill School of Medicine in 1997. I later completed a fellowship at Emory University Hospital, Atlanta, while specializing in toxicology and emergency medicine.
Describe your experience in emergency medicine.
Well, I've worked at Midlands St. Joseph Hospital as an emergency room physician, Sacred Heart of Midlands Hospital as the senior emergency room physician, and now I work at River Valley Hospital as the chief emergency room physician.
Have you ever been published?
Yes, I've published work on both toxicology and emergency medicine. One of my personal favorites actually is Don't You Know That You're Toxic? Differential diagnosis in poisoning cases.
What typically happens when a person walks into an emergency room?
The first thing that happens is my colleagues and I complete triage on the patient.
Explain triage.
Simply put, triage is the assignment of the order of patient treatment depending on the urgency of their illnesses or wounds.
What happens next?
We then begin to see if there's an obvious cause of harm in order to form a preliminary diagnosis.
What do you do if the harm isn't obvious?
At that point, I typically order lab tests, consult with other doctors, and continue further observation in order to update that preliminary diagnosis.
Does that diagnosis ever change?
Yes, it can, and it often does. The fast-paced environment of the emergency room requires me to adapt very quickly to changing conditions.
What do you do once you've formed that diagnosis?
We then begin an appropriate treatment of the patient.
Dr. Kwan, is this process of triage, diagnosis, and treatment standard practicing procedure?
Yes, it is used in every emergency room throughout the country.
And do you reliably use this procedure?
Yes, I do, every time I'm working.
Were you working on June 7th, 2019?
Yes.
Were you the one who treated Mr. Genesis Petrillo?
Yes, I was. I first encountered Mr. Petrillo when he was brought into the hospital by the EMTs.
Were you able to speak with him?
Yes, I was able to speak with Mr. Petrillo. However, it was rather difficult as his speech was slurred.
What was he able to tell you?
He was able to convey to me that he had some pain or tightness in his chest. At a moment when we began to move him, he actually lost the ability to walk altogether. So naturally, I rushed to grab a wheelchair in order to transport him.
What happened next?
My team and I determined that Mr. Petrillo was in need of urgent care due to his apparent declining condition. We gathered samples for testing and began to form a diagnosis immediately.
What was that diagnosis?
Well, due to the symptoms initially observed, such as slowed speech, slurred breathing, vomiting, and nausea, I originally believed that Mr. Petrillo could have been suffering from alcohol poisoning.
What happened next?
Well, I continued further observation of Mr. Petrillo, and there were 3 additional symptoms that concerned me.
Why did these symptoms concern you?
These additional symptoms were symptoms of neurotoxicity, and they were inconsistent with alcohol poisoning.
Objection, Your Honor. Improper opinion under Rule 702. May I be heard?
You may.
Your Honor, while opposing counsel has laid the foundation for this witness to be qualified as an expert, this expert had a duty to report all opinions before trial, as well as the basis and reasoning for them. Your Honor, the term neurotoxicity is never found in this witness's report, nor is there a reasonable synonym for neurotoxicity found in this report. Therefore, this witness has failed to disclose the basis and reasoning behind his opinion, and this should not be disclosed based on a timely objection under Kane Software Investigations Kane Software Company versus Mars Investigations, which is Midland's case law.
Response from plaintiff?
Yes, Your Honor. Opposing counsel is objecting to Rule 702, improper expert opinion. Under Rule 702, we have met all 4 prongs during this testimony. We have met 702A, which states that Dr. Kwan does have the specified knowledge. We have met prong 702B, which states that he does have sufficient materials. We have met prong 702C, which states that he has a reliable method in this case. And we have met prong 702D, which states that he applied this method reliably. Therefore, because he has met all 4 prongs of 702, Dr. Kwan is qualified to make an expert testimony.
Your Honor, may I share my screen?
Counsel, I believe the objection centered around a disclosure or failed to disclose prior to trial an opinion. And so was this opinion on neurotoxicity disclosed prior to trial?
Your Honor, if I may proffer?
You may.
Dr. Kwan will go on to state that the neurotoxicity relates to all of the symptoms Mr. Petrillo exhibited, and that through his method of completing triage and forming diagnosis, he was able to connect these symptoms under neurotoxicity with organophosphate poisoning, which is in his report, along with all of those symptoms.
May I respond on those grounds, Your Honor?
Briefly.
And may I share my screen to show the case law?
You may.
Your Honor, if you, I'm sure you have access to this as well, but if you could pull up page 4 of the Midlands case law, Kane Software Company versus Mars Investigation. We look right here, Your Honor. Expert reports that are exchanged prior to trial must contain a complete statement of all opinions the expert will testify to and the basis and reasons for them. Your Honor, neurotoxicity is now being used as a basis for Dr. Kwan's opinion. That is nowhere in Dr. Kwan's report. Therefore, this is improper. And as you can see, Your Honor, upon a timely objection from opposing counsel, such testimony must be excluded. Therefore, Your Honor, this is improper under rules, or according to Kane Software Company versus Mars Investigations. They failed to meet their duty to disclose.
Your Honor, if I may?
You may, briefly, please.
Yes, Your Honor. Because neurotoxicity relates to all of the symptoms, Dr. Kwan did relate. Just because he didn't use that specific word, he is still going through his process of diagnosis, and the end result, his conclusions that he disclosed, is organophosphate poisoning, which is found in his report. Therefore, this testimony is admissible.
Well, I'm going to sustain the objection in part. I don't believe that the diagnosis of neurotoxicity was previously disclosed. At least I haven't been presenting evidence that that was previously disclosed, but the underlying symptoms and how they relate to the phosphate poisoning, I guess, side of it, or the phosphate contaminant that was found, I think you can go into that factually. But as far as a diagnosis, if that wasn't previously disclosed, then we can't get into that. Are the parties clear on my ruling?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, I just want to make sure I was clear for the parties. You may proceed.
Dr. Kwan, explain the first symptom that concerns you.
Well, the pupils were severely contracted, Mr. Petrillo, which is not a symptom of alcohol poisoning.
Explain the second.
Secondly, Mr. Petrillo exhibited involuntary muscle twitching and incontinence, which is involuntary urination and defecation. These are neither symptoms of alcohol poisoning either, and that is also what led to my belief that he could be suffering from something more.
Was there any other symptom that concerned you?
Yes. While alcohol poisoning typically produces a weak but rapid heart rate, Mr. Petrillo's pulse was slowed.
What did the presence of these symptoms lead you to believe?
Like I said, due to the progression through these symptoms, I believe that Mr. Petrillo could have been suffering from organophosphate poisoning due to the symptoms that he exhibited in addition to the original symptoms we observed.
What is an organophosphate?
Organophosphate poisons are neurotoxins that are commonly used in insecticides, and they can be very dangerous to humans. They inhibit the production of an enzyme called acetylcholinesterase, which causes the nervous system to fail.
How much of these poisons are deadly?
Any ingestion of this poison can be potentially deadly to a human.
And how did you determine that organophosphates were a factor in this case?
Organophosphates are the only commonly used pesticide in all of Midlands that cause the pupils to contract, which is one of the symptoms I observed in Mr. Petrillo.
Explain how doctors typically test for organophosphates.
Low acetylcholinesterase levels are closely correlated with organophosphate pesticide exposure.
Do doctors typically use these levels?
Yes, doctors can and often do use low acetylcholinesterase levels to diagnose organophosphate poisoning.
Dr. Kwan, how can a person be exposed to organophosphates?
A person can be exposed in 3 ways. They can inhale the poison while it's suspended in the air, absorb the poison through their skin, and lastly, directly ingest the poison.
What way did you determine occurred to Mr. Petrillo?
The order and time frame in which Mr. Petrillo's symptoms appeared were inconsistent with both inhalation poisoning and contact poisoning. As a result, I proceeded under the belief that Mr. Petrillo had ingested the poison.
What did you do next?
I began to administer an organophosphate antidote immediately because if I was correct, Mr. Petrillo's symptoms had advanced to the point to where he was near death.
What happened then, Dr. Kwan?
Shortly after administering the organophosphate antidote, Mr. Petrillo had a coughing fit and a seizure and then fell into a coma.
Did he ever wake up?
No, he never regained consciousness, and despite our best efforts to revive him, he passed away in the morning. I've been doing this for years, and it's always hard when you lose a patient.
Now, Dr. Kwan, did anything else confirm your diagnosis?
Yes, actually the 2 lab test results that I ordered during treatment came back.
What did those lab results say?
These lab results indicated to me that Mr. Petrillo had low acetylcholinesterase levels at the time that we tested him. And the second lab test indicated to us that he ingested both wine and organophosphate pesticides.
So, Dr. Kwan, what did you conclude caused Genesis Petrillo's death?
Mr. Petrillo most likely ingested wine contaminated with organophosphate pesticides on the evening of June 7, 2019. The order and time frame that Mr. Petrillo's reported symptoms appeared perfectly matched the expected progression of a pesticide poisoning case. And these pesticides are what ultimately led to the death of Mr. Genesis Petrillo.
Thank you, Dr. Kwan. No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
Defense?
May I cross, Your Honor?
You may.
Good morning, Dr. Kwan. I just
Good
want to
morning.
make some clarifications about what exactly your opinion is for the jury. You believe that
Yes, sir.
Genesis Petrillo ingested some contaminated wine, right?
Yes,
You believe that that wine was contaminated with an organophosphate pesticide, right?
that is correct.
You believe that that contaminated wine caused Genesis Petrillo's death.
Mr. Petrillo did die from organophosphate poisoning, yes.
Dr. Kwan, that's the extent of your opinion, right?
I'm sorry, what do you mean by that?
So, Dr. Kwan, you can't tell the jury when the pesticide got into the wine, can you?
That is correct.
You can't tell the jury whether the pesticide contaminated some grapes that ended up being made into the wine, can you?
That is correct.
You can't tell the jury whether there was a wine barrel in a wine cellar that got contaminated with pesticide.
That is correct. Based off of the materials I looked at, I could not answer that question.
You can't tell the jury whether there was an empty bottle, or excuse me, an empty wine bottle that got contaminated with pesticide and then filled with wine, can you?
No, I cannot.
Dr. Kwan, you actually can't even tell this jury exactly how much pesticide Genesis Petrillo ingested that night.
No, there is not currently a test for this. However, based off of the symptoms I observed, I would consider it a pretty severe case.
Dr. Kwan, all of the jury can tell from your testimony is that Genesis Petrillo probably died from drinking contaminated wine.
That's incorrect.
Dr. Kwan, all the jury can tell is that Genesis Petrillo probably, based on your conclusions, can tell that Genesis Petrillo died from drinking wine that was contaminated with pesticides. Isn't that right?
That is correct. He did die from organophosphate poisoning.
I pass the witness, Your Honor.
Ms. Frank?
No, redirect examination, Your Honor. I ask that my witness be allowed to step down from the stand.
Witness may step down. Does the plaintiff have any other witnesses?
No, Your Honor. At this time, the plaintiff rests our case in chief and asks for a brief 5 to 10 minute recess.
Why don't we do a 5-minute recess? I've got 23 past the hour. We'll say, let's get ready to roll. Let's say 7 minutes at the half hour. Everybody take a break. I remind everyone we are being live streamed on YouTube, so please shut your audio as well as your video down at this time, and we'll get started at 11:30 is my time.
Yes,
Yes,
Your
Your
Honor.
Honor.
Is the defense present? Are the plaintiff and defense present?
I believe the plaintiff is here, Your Honor.
Okay. Let me make sure. Is Ms. Voth and Mr. Cole present as well?
Yes, I am.
Yes, Your Honor.
Oh,
Okay, excellent. So let's go ahead and get started. Is the defense ready to call their first witness?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Austin Lewis to the stand.
All right, and Mr. Lewis, you've been previously sworn in. You may proceed.
Good morning, Mr. Lewis. Can you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Well, sure. Howdy, y'all. My name's Austin Lewis. How y'all doing?
Mr. Lewis, what do you do for a living?
Well, I grow the best wine in Midlands, I'll tell you that.
And how are you related to this case?
Oh, I've been the head winemaker at Peony Estates since 2015.
Mr. Lewis, what is your job at Peony Estates?
Well, like I said, I'm the head winemaker, so that means I make sure that everything goes smoothly from grapes all the way down to the bottom. I go ahead and handle maintenance around the place, and I also supervise any pesticide sprayings we do around the property.
Now, Mr. Lewis, you mentioned that you supervise pesticide sprayings at Peony Estates. Why is that?
Well, Peony Estates is located near something called the Slow Love Swamp, but if I'm being honest with you all, I got nothing but hate for that swamp. The amount of pests and critters we got running around keeps me running all day and night.
How does Peony Estates deal with its bug problem?
Well, at first we tried this fancy schmancy organic solution around the place, but it proved to be pretty inexpensive and pretty ineffective, so we went ahead and ditched that pretty soon after.
After you stopped using organic pesticides, what did you use instead at Peony Estates?
Well, we went ahead and switched to this chemical solution. We started using that around the wine processing plant, where the bottling and everything else occurs. And then in around 2018, we went ahead and started using it inside the production areas, specifically in the bottling section and the wine cave itself.
Now, Mr. Lewis, you mentioned using a lot of pesticides at Peony Estates. Is it legal to have this amount at Peony Estates?
Well, sure, yeah, it's illegal so long as you're following the correct procedures and proper steps and everything. We were cited a little bit ago, but, since then we've done our best to make sure that we avoid any possible citations and really kept an eye on stuff.
Now, Mr. Lewis, I want to talk to you about a memo you sent to your employees in 2018. Would you remember this memo if I showed it to you?
Yeah, I would.
Your Honor, permission to share our screen with Exhibit 12?
You may.
And Mr. Lewis, can you please read what the from line says on this document?
It says, sorry, it's a little hard to see. It says from Austin Lewis, head winemaker. There it is.
Can you read what the to line says on this document?
It says to all Peony Estates employees.
And Mr. Lewis, does this document appear to be accurate?
Yeah, I sent this, yeah.
Your Honor, at this time, defense enters this into evidence as Exhibit 12.
Any objections from the plaintiff?
Yes, Your Honor. I would object to hearsay as to this out-of-court statement being offered for the truth of the matter asserted.
Is this... is there a response from the defense?
Yes, Your Honor. This document is not being offered for truth of the matter asserted. Frankly, we don't care that Austin Lewis sent out this memo to his employees. Rather, we care about effects that it had on the listeners in subsequent action. What the document says and how it influences the way that Peony Estates' employees conducted their pesticide practices.
I'll overrule the objection. The document's admitted.
Thank you, Your Honor. Now, Mr. Lewis, I want to direct your attention to the second paragraph on this memo. Can you please read what the first line says on it?
Sure. We need each and every one of you to prepare for the entirety of Peony Estates for an imminent pesticide spraying.
And Mr. Lewis, what does the line immediately after this say about spraying?
It says we need to do this quickly and cheaply. Nothing else matters.
And let the record reflect that I've stopped sharing my screen. Now, Mr. Lewis, with this process in place, do you think it's possible that a bottle of wine could still get contaminated if it was left out?
I mean, look, we do our best to make sure nothing happens. You know, we try to keep an eye on everything, but, you know, I got multiple employees under me, and people leave things out. They're forgetful. You know, as my mama always said, no one's perfect, so things can go wrong.
So if a bottle was left out, could you tell that it got contaminated with pesticides?
Objection, Your Honor. Calls for speculation.
I'll let the witness answer if the witness is able to.
Mr. Lewis, I'll ask my question again. If a bottle got left out, could you tell that the bottle got contaminated with pesticide?
No, not without drinking it, no.
Mr. Lewis, I now want to ask you about your relationship with Harper Martini. When did you first meet Harper?
Oh, well, I met Harper way back when I was working at a different winery called the Rosie and Pedro. And then sometime around in 2015, she went ahead and told me that she was opening up Peony Estates and offered me the job of head winemaker there. So I immediately accepted that.
And what was your relationship like with Miss Martini?
I mean, you know, me and Harper are great friends. I mean, you know, I'm so glad to have been along this journey with her since she started Peony Estates and happy to have seen it grown as it has.
And what was Miss Martini like as a boss?
She was a great boss, you know. I mean, she worked real hard to make sure Peony Estates was in tip-top shape. And she worked especially hard on that their wedding she was planning for Genesis and Casey.
Mr. Lewis, did Miss Martini ever tell you that she wanted to poison Mr. Petrillo?
Oh, no. I never heard anything like that.
Did you ever see Miss Martini put pesticide into a bottle of wine?
No, I never saw anything like that.
I pass the witness.
Plaintiff? Counsel?
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Lewis, Harper was familiar with the pesticide use at Peony Estates, correct?
Yes, she was.
And she knew that where you stored your pesticides?
Yes, that's true.
And Harper told you that Harper knew that the pesticides could be poisonous, yes?
Yes, she did.
And she knew that they could be fatal if ingested.
Yeah, she told me that.
Now, Mr. Lewis, she also told you about a time where an employee drank wine contaminated with pesticides. Isn't that true?
Yeah, that happened a couple of years ago.
And she said that the employee drank only a little bit of contaminated wine, but still got very sick and almost died.
Yeah, that happened.
And Mr. Lewis, Harper also mentioned that you couldn't tell from looking at the glass that the pesticides were mixed in.
Right. It's virtually impossible to tell unless you consume it.
She also said that you couldn't smell it either.
Right.
And Mr. Lewis, you know that Harper's daughter, Casey, was engaged to Genesis Petrillo?
Yes, they were.
In fact, Harper repeatedly told you that Harper hated Genesis.
Yeah, I heard that once or twice.
You also know that Genesis and Harper didn't get along.
Yeah, you know, there was a little bit of fighting here and there, but to be honest, you know, my in-laws don't get along either, and neither do I with my in-law. So, you know, I understood a little bit.
And Harper also said that if Harper could push a button and make Genesis disappear, Harper would absolutely do it.
Your Honor, to hearsay. This statement.
Go ahead.
This is an out-of-court statement being offered to prove the truth of the matter asserted. This statement is hearsay.
Is there a response from the plaintiff?
Yes, Your Honor. Under Rule 801D2, this is not hearsay as it is a statement elicited by our party opponent.
Overruled. You may proceed.
Mr. Lewis, I'll re-ask my question. Harper also said that if she could push a button and make Genesis disappear, she would absolutely do it.
Yeah, I remember something to that effect.
And Mr. Lewis, you work at Peony Estates.
I do. I'm the head winemaker there.
And Harper owns most of Peony Estates.
Right. I own a small percentage, very small, but yeah.
In fact, that percentage is 10%.
Yes.
And if Harper were to lose this case today, that would also likely shut down the winery.
I mean, I don't know about shut down. I can't imagine it'd be good. I'm not much of a business guy.
But it could possibly threaten your job at the winery.
Well, like I said, there's no way it could be good. But as far as like how the business will do, I'm not sure.
But it could cost you a lot of money, isn't that true?
Potentially, yeah.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
All right. Anything else from this witness?
No, Your Honor. I ask that Mr. Lewis be excused.
He may.
Thank you, y'all.
Next witness from the defense.
Your Honor, the defense calls Blair Osborne to the stand.
All right. Ms. Osborne has been previously sworn. You may proceed.
Hi, can you please introduce yourself to the court?
Hello, my name is Blair Osborne.
Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm an events planner. I own my own company called Bliss by Blair Events. I plan weddings, birthday parties, bar mitzvahs, all the sorts.
Why are you here in court today?
Well, I planned the wedding of Casey Soto and Genesis Petrillo. Genesis's death was a tragedy. It was really terrible that the wedding had to be canceled. I was actually there at the rehearsal on June 7th, the night that Genesis got sick.
How did you end up planning this wedding specifically?
Well, I planned dozens of weddings and events with Harper Martini and Peony Estates. So naturally, I was Harper's go-to choice to plan the wedding. I mean, have you seen this face? Yeah, of course you have. It's because I was the face of the 2016 issue of Suave for my brilliant portrayal of Farm, an animal farm theme that captures the simplicity of life and the harmony of nature. It was really my best work.
Ms. Osborne, you mentioned that you've planned dozens of events with Harper Martini. How was planning this event in particular?
Well, I've had a long history with Peony Estates and Harper, so she actually saved my company when it was still a little budding business in Midlands. It's a great venue, lovely property. Unfortunately, I have had to cut ties with her and Peony Estates, but it was fun while it lasted.
You mentioned that Ms. Martini seemed a little bit less focused this time. What do you mean by that?
Well, Harper wasn't really her normal self. She was much less helpful to me in planning this particular event, but I'll chalk it up to her personal ties to it. But really, I just felt that Harper was being stretched way too thin.
What do you mean she was being stretched way too thin?
Well, there was a lot of drama at this wedding. Harper and Genesis were always arguing about different choices that had to be made in the wedding process. And on top of all of that, Harper was practically running the winery by herself.
So now I want to talk about the wedding rehearsal. How did that night go for you?
Well, I planned a lovely rehearsal, but Harper and Genesis were always arguing with each other. Nothing really seemed to be different.
Did anything significant happen at the wedding rehearsal that night?
Well, there were a bunch of toasts. Harper made this wonderful toast that was so nice and so heartfelt. And she even gave Genesis this really beautiful bottle of wine in front of everyone. It was really lovely. I shed a tear.
What happened next?
Well, the next morning was supposed to be the morning of the wedding, but of course that didn't happen. That's when Genesis passed away. It was so sad, especially since Genesis was just about to begin his life.
Now, I want to talk about how this case has affected your relationship with Peony Estates and Harper Martini. Your Honor, permission to share my screen with what has been previously marked as Exhibit 22?
You may.
Miss Osborne, can you see what I just put up on my screen?
Yes.
And can you, without going into the context, can you describe what it is?
Yes, this is a social media post that I posted on my Instagram after the event.
Is it a fair and accurate representation of the post as you remember making it?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, the defense offers Exhibit 22 into evidence.
Response? Any
No
objections?
objection, Your Honor.
All right, 22 will be admitted.
Ms. Osborne, can you tell the jury how your relationship has changed with Peonia Estates since Genesis Petrio's death?
Well, to be honest, I don't really have a relationship with them anymore. You see, I decided that it would be best if I severed ties and worked with other wineries and venues in the area. I just don't think I want to be associated with the negative publicity.
Your Honor, I pass the witness, and I'm going to stop screen sharing Exhibit 22.
Thank you.
May I proceed?
You may.
Now, Miss Osborne, as you stated, you were hired by Harper Martini to plan this wedding, correct?
Yes, I was hired by her.
And Harper said the fact that you were hired was originally a secret from Casey and Genesis.
Yes, it was a secret.
And the first meeting you had with them seemed pleasant.
Yes.
But then you started receiving conflicting information.
I did receive some confusing info.
Especially from Harper and Genesis. There was a lot of conflicting information from the two of them.
Yes, but that goes with any wedding.
And if you had to describe the theme of the wedding, you would say it was crying and fighting.
Yes.
And you met the wedding party again after they had had a separate event at a casino, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
And at that meeting, everyone sat in total silence?
Yes.
And then Harper played a voicemail from Genesis.
Yes, I was a bit distracted while listening to it, but yes, she did play a voicemail.
And after playing that voicemail from Genesis, she said, one day Genesis will drink the wrong thing and it will kill Genesis. Correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
You were also present on June 7th at the rehearsal party, correct?
Yes, I planned the rehearsal dinner and I was a bit nervous, but it really came out to be a spectacular event up until that night.
And at the beginning of this rehearsal party, Genesis and Harper were fighting?
Yes.
And there seemed to be conflict in between the two of them.
Yes, there seemed to be conflict, but it wasn't anything different than usual.
Well, you described you thought this conflict in particular was the boiling point.
Yes.
And then things seemed to smooth over.
Yes.
Harper Martini presented Genesis with a bottle of wine.
Yes, it was really a beautiful gesture. I had mascara on my eyes, so when I started crying, it got smeared all over my face.
And when Harper Martini presented that bottle of wine, she said for him to drink it by himself and reflect on everything he's done.
Yes.
Now, Miss Osborne, you don't believe that Harper poisoned Genesis.
That's correct.
And in fact, no amount of evidence could make you believe that?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you, Ms. Osborne. No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, any further questions for this witness?
No redirect, Your Honor. May this witness be excused.
Hey. And defense may call us next witness.
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the defense calls Harper Martini to the stand.
All right, and Ms. Martini's been previously sworn. You may proceed.
Good morning. Could you tell us all who you are?
Of course, my name is Harper Martini.
Now, Ms. Martini, we've heard about this all throughout trial, so I have to ask. Did you poison Genesis Petrillo?
No, of course I didn't. Hurting my daughter would be hurting Genesis Petrillo would be hurting my daughter, and I would never do that.
All right, I actually want to take a step back and talk about your business, Peony Estates. How did you start it?
Well, my parents in Puerto Rico, they always wanted their own winery. So they moved to California and built a winery from scratch. And I was so impressed. They always wanted to bring the flavors of the tropic to the West Coast. And that's exactly what they did. And so later on in my life, I wanted to do the same. So I made my own winery in Midlands.
Miss Martini, before all this happened, how was your business doing?
It was amazing. We concentrated on small batches of high quality vino. Okay, I always wanted to bring the flavors of the tropics. So there was one bottle that was sangria and it was delicioso. And then we opened our B&B. It was amazing. Well, we were named the #1 winery in Midlands. I consider myself the J-Lo of wine, post Marc Anthony. But after what happened to Genesis Petrillo, it hasn't been the same.
I actually want to talk about what happened to Mr. Petrillo a little bit later, but first, how did you feel about his and your daughter's relationship?
Hi, Mira. I didn't like him. He was a bad influence on Casey. We tried and we tried, but he was a little crazy.
What do you mean by that?
He was a very heavy drinker. And, I can get a little crazy myself, but he would take it a little too far. One time he got drunk and sent me a voicemail and he was insulting me, calling me all these things. And, I tried to turn the other cheek, but it was hard. Nevertheless, I tried to make peace.
Objection, Your Honor. More prejudicial than prohibitive may be heard on those grounds.
You may.
Your Honor, the witness just characterized Genesis Petrillo as crazy and used that exact phrasing. To use this phrasing is to mislead the jury to what Genesis Petrillo's actual mental state was this time and to potentially mislead the jury to think that Genesis had some sort of actual diagnosed medical condition that may have made him crazy. Therefore, this is more prejudicial than probative.
I'm going to overrule that objection. You may proceed.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Martini, how did you go about trying to make peace with Genesis?
Well, I tried to take him salsa dancing. That was a very stressful situation for me. My feet hurt at the end of it. It was disastrous. So afterwards, I was coming up with a plan of a gift I could give him at the wedding.
I actually want to talk about the wedding rehearsal first. How was that night?
It was very stressful, actually. I was trying to finish all the kinks and make sure that it was perfect. I felt like the bride myself.
What else did you do while preparing for the wedding rehearsal?
Oh, yes, I prepared some wedding gifts for everyone in the wedding party, especially Genesis.
What were those gifts?
They were bottles of wine. I had made a special blend for everyone, and that was the Horizon bottle of wine. And then I had made a different bottle of wine for Genesis Petrillo. I called it the Cara.
Ms. Martini, any chance you could tell us around what time you gave Genesis that bottle of wine?
It had to be later in the night, like around 9 or 10 p.m.
Ms. Martini, we've heard a couple of times that you might have said that you wanted Genesis to disappear. Could you tell us what you meant by that?
I just didn't want her to be a part of our family. I thought Casey has so much potential and she could marry someone, rich. But she didn't. And, I wasn't the biggest fan, but I didn't want her to die.
Ms. Martini, I want to talk about something else that we've heard. We've heard that you may have poisoned that bottle of wine that very same night. Would that have been possible?
No, it wouldn't have been possible. The winemaking process is extremely long and complicated, and it would have been impossible to do it all that night.
Ms. Martini, I'm no winemaker. Could you tell us all a little bit more about that process?
Very easy. So you take the bottle and you decant it from the aging cask, right? Then you cork it, and then you take a heating filament and you seal the bottle at the top, and then it's tamper-proof.
Now, Ms. Martini, what if I were to reused the same wine that was already in the bottle, would I have been able to uncork it and reseal it?
No, because we use industrial sized equipment. It takes about 100 bottles at a time. So it's very efficient, but it's not very fast. So it would have not been possible to do it all that night.
Oh, let's say I tried to do it. Is there any way I could have avoided being noticed at your winery?
I don't think so. Look, it's very loud and it takes a lot of equipment to do all this, right? And so it was, one of them is in the kitchen. It's next to the dining room. And then the other one is in the bottling area. And that one's also next to the dining room. So it would have all been super loud.
All right, Ms. Martini, I actually want to, would you recognize a diagram of Peony Estates if I were to show it to you?
Of course.
Your Honor, permission to show on screen previously entered Exhibit 4.
Permission granted.
All right, let's just get that pulled up real quick. All right, Ms. Martini, can you see that okay?
I can. Mm-hmm.
All right, could you describe to us where on this diagram all of this equipment was in relation to the dining room?
Of course, of course. So if you see at the top right, in my screen is on the top right, you'll see that it's a kitchen, tasting room, bottling area, and dining room. So all of that is in the same area.
All right, let's get a red circle around that real quick. Ms. Martini, does that accurately reflect where you said everything was?
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
All right, well, let's pull that down. Now, Ms. Bertoni, I want to go back to the wedding rehearsal. What happened after you gave those bottles of wine out?
Well, after I gave those bottles out, I celebrated a little bit myself, and then I went to sleep around 10:30, I want to say. And then I woke up very early in the morning from a phone call.
What was that phone call about?
I had a call about someone in the hospital. And I didn't know who it was. I was unaware. I thought maybe someone got too drunk, they got in trouble. I didn't know. But I really did hope that they were okay.
Miss Martini, what happened the next morning?
Well, the next morning, I found out who was in the hospital.
Miss Martini, has anything good at all come out of this for you?
Look, I'm a mother, and I would never want to lose my child. Another mother lost their child. Genesis Petrillo died, of course not. My business is in ruins. I haven't talked to my baby girl in a year. I lost everything from this. Of course not.
Right. Thanks, Miss Martini. Your Honor, I pass the witness.
All right. Plaintiff's counsel?
Yes, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Miss Martini, your daughter Casey was the light of your life, correct?
She is. She's the light of my life, my mariposa.
To you, Casey was perfect.
Yeah, she is. To this day, she's perfect.
That was except for her one flaw, her partner Genesis Petrillo, correct?
She didn't pick the right person.
In fact, Miss Martini, you would wish that Genesis and Casey had never met.
Yes, I thought he was a bad influence on her.
Didn't approve of their relationship.
That's correct.
But it wasn't just the relationship you didn't approve of. You didn't like Genesis as a person.
Yeah, I didn't think he was a good influence. He was a heavy drinker. He was rude. You know, that was not okay.
At one point, Genesis had even insulted your winery. Isn't that true?
He did. Mm-hmm.
And you view Genesis as a threat to your winery, which you hope to pass to your only daughter, Casey.
Yeah, this is my legacy, and I wanted to give it to Casey. And he wasn't a good influence. He wanted to take her away from the winery. You know, it wasn't good.
But Miss Martini, Genesis wasn't just a threat to your winery. You view Genesis as a threat to Casey herself.
Yeah, he wasn't good for her.
In fact, at one point, Genesis made Casey drink so much that she had to go to the hospital with alcohol poisoning.
Yeah,
But despite this, the engagement went on. Isn't that true?
that's correct. She wanted to marry him, and at some point I had to accept the facts.
You accepted that fact and actually threw an engagement party for them at Peony Estates. Isn't that true?
That's correct, yes.
And it was at this engagement party you overheard Genesis Petrillo planning to move their wedding to your competitor, Rosie and Pedro's. Isn't that true?
Yes. And then I convinced Casey to have the wedding at Peony Estates in her home where it deserved to be.
Miss Martini, when you heard that Genesis was planning to move their wedding, you were angrier than you had ever been in your life.
I was angry, of course.
In fact, if Casey wasn't standing right next to Genesis, you would have went up and slapped Genesis. Isn't that true?
I was feeling a little emotional, but I didn't do anything, violent.
But that's a yes to my question. If Casey was there, you would have slapped Genesis.
I was being a little dramatic, yes.
But besides that, you tried to remain civil. Isn't that true?
Of course. Again, I tried to turn the other cheek. I even extended a great branch to Genesis.
That's right. You invited Genesis to lunch. Isn't that true?
I did.
And it was at this lunch that you learned Genesis was planning to move with Casey. Isn't that true?
Yes, I also found that out a little bit later as well through the voicemail.
That's right. Specifically in the voicemail, Genesis was planning to take Casey away from you and move to France.
That's correct.
When you heard this, Miss Martini, you called Genesis and exploded.
Yes, I was angry.
You told him that you would do anything to protect your only daughter.
Of course, like any mother would.
You told Genesis that not even moving to France would save him from your wrath.
I said some dramatic things, yes. I was angry. He was taking away my daughter. He was already not a bad influence on her. It was bad.
But besides this, the wedding went on and you accepted that fact, isn't it true?
That's correct. I did.
And you planned during the wedding rehearsal to make a peace offering to Genesis.
I did.
And specifically, that peace offering was going to be a bottle of the Cara wine.
That's correct. A red blend I had made specifically for Genesis with all the blends that Casey had told me were Genesis' favorites.
That's right. You planned to give this wine that was made specifically to Genesis during the wedding rehearsal.
That's correct.
Well, Miss Martini, that's not the only thing you gave to Genesis, isn't it true?
How so?
Miss Martini, you gave Genesis a $300,000 check, isn't that true?
Oh, you're talking about the note. Yes. So I had written a note.
If you gave the $300,000 check, not a note.
Yes, I did because I had written a note to Genesis Petrillo while I was drunk, and I had watched a telenovela, and they had offered money to the other person so they would go away, and I was like, you know what, this is gonna work. It didn't work. She didn't leave. He didn't leave. So I gave her the money, and then I kept on with the wedding.
But to direct you back to my question, Miss Martini, this $300,000 check was to make Genesis disappear from you and Casey's lives.
So he would leave, finally, but he didn't.
As you mentioned, you wrote a note to Genesis that went along with that check, isn't it true?
Yes, I did. I did write that note.
Miss Martini, would you recognize this note if I showed it to you today in court?
That's correct.
Your Honor, permission to screen share what has been previously marked as Exhibit 24 constructively outside the jury.
You may.
Now, Miss Martini, what did I just? Is this a copy of the note that you wrote?
Yes, it is. Mm-hmm.
And do you recognize this as your handwriting?
That is my handwriting.
And are those your initials at the bottom of the note?
That's correct.
Your Honor, at this time, the plaintiff would like to move Exhibit 24 into evidence.
No objections, Your Honor.
24 is admitted.
Now, Ms. Martini, it was in this note that you told Genesis that you were going to make him disappear. Isn't that true?
No, I didn't say I was gonna make him disappear.
Well, Ms. Martini, you wrote, "I need you out of our lives." Isn't that true?
Yeah, I told him the truth. I wanted him out of our lives.
And you told him that if he didn't disappear, I will take you out of the picture the hard way. Isn't that true?
Yes, that I had copied that from the telenovela that I had seen. I thought it would maybe scare him off a little bit, you know.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
All right.
No further
Anything else?
No further questions at this time, Your Honor. Can Ms. Martini be excused?
She can. Thank you. You can step down. Does the defense have any other witnesses?
No, Your Honor. With that, the defense rests its case in chief, and we'd ask for a brief 5 to 10 minute recess before I move into closing arguments.
Oh, let's see. We'll give you about, I've got 6 after. Let's give you 9 minutes. That should give you enough time to get prepared for closing. We'll have closing after that. I remind everyone again, we're on YouTube live streaming, so turn off your video, turn off your audio, and we'll get back. All right, folks, we about ready to get started again?
The defense is ready to proceed whenever.
All right, well, let's make sure everyone's here.
Louis Cole's here.
All right. And Ms. Voth, are you present as well?
I'm here as well. Thank you.
Excellent. All right. Are the parties ready for closing argument?
The plaintiff is ready, Your Honor.
All right, and I believe the defense announced previously.
Yes, Your Honor, we're ready to proceed.
Okay. The plaintiff, you may begin.
May it please the court. I will make you disappear. Ladies and gentlemen, as you have heard in today's trial, this mother loved her daughter so much, she was not willing to let her go. Time and time again, Harper showed how far she was willing to go to keep Genesis out of Casey's life. On the napkin, Harper states to Genesis, I will take you out of the picture the hard way, and you have till the 7th. And it all came to a head on June 7th when Harper did exactly what she had said she was going to do. June 8th should have been the best day of Genesis's life. Instead, she never made it down the aisle. She never took another breath. And this is why we, the plaintiff, have filed a claim against Harper for battery. Ladies and gentlemen, this means that we had the burden of proof. And as the judge will tell you, we have met that burden today by a preponderance of the evidence, or in other words, more likely than not. We had to prove 3 things today. First, Harper Martini intentionally mixed pesticides into the wine. Second, when Harper put those pesticides into the wine, it was her intent to cause harm. And third, when Genesis drank that wine, she died as a result of those pesticides. We have met the burden here today, and we have shown you that Harper made Genesis disappear, that she poisoned Genesis, and Genesis died as a result. First, we heard the testimony of Angel Rodriguez, who told you exactly what happened on the night of June 7th and 8th. You heard how Harper hated Genesis and how she made Genesis disappear. Harper fought with Genesis while planning the wedding, during the rehearsal dinner, and fought with her hours before she died. You heard Harper threaten Genesis that night, saying, I will make you disappear. Folks, look what happened. Harper made Genesis so scared that she told Angel, I'm afraid Harper is going to kill me. Moreover, you heard how Genesis was the only person to drink from the poisoned bottle of Cara wine, except for Angel, who had 1 sip and spit it out because it didn't taste right. Angel also testified that although Genesis was drinking, her symptoms had her symptoms that had progressed through the night were not consistent with the amount of alcohol that she had consumed. Secondly, you heard the testimony of our expert witness, Dr. Kwan, a specialist in toxicology that was Genesis' doctor in the ER. And he testified that the extreme and specific symptoms Genesis was having that night lined up with the symptoms expected of somebody who had been poisoned by an organophosphate, which are the pesticide, which are present in the pesticides. Likewise, Dr. Kwan tested the blood, tested the wine, and found the exact same organophosphate. He told you how Genesis died. She was poisoned by those pesticides. Finally, you heard the testimony of Harper's own employee and the caterer of the wedding, Sam Arnold. He detailed how Harper was constantly fighting with Genesis and how Harper was clearly at her boiling point. Harper had a plan, as she stated, something that would take care of their problems forever. You heard how Harper specially reserved that deadly Cara wine for Genesis and Genesis only. Moreover, you learned that Sam saw a bottle of pesticides in the kitchen and asked Harper what it was for. And Harper didn't say it was to take care of the insect infestation. Rather, Harper said it was to kill pests like Genesis. Casey was the light of Harper's life. Harper was not willing or ready to let her daughter go. She fought with Genesis for years, and she was willing to do whatever it took to keep her daughter in her life, to keep her daughter in her control. On June 7th, Harper saw that Casey was slipping away and did the only thing she could think of to keep Casey around. She made Genesis disappear. Ladies and gentlemen, we have proven to you that Harper intended to harm Genesis and did so on June 7th. Members of the jury, there is only one reasonable verdict that you can find today. Find the defendant, Harper Martini, liable of battery. Thank you.
Thank you. The defense may proceed.
May it please the court. Harper Martini had everything to lose and nothing to gain. Now, Mr. Marlett just came up here and told you a story, and from the way he told it, I almost want to believe it myself. It had intrigue, secrets, betrayal. It was like one of those hour and 45-minute dramas you see on TV. Ladies and gentlemen, there's a problem. This isn't TV. This is real life, and in real life, you need evidence. Mean words, out of context quotes, and a smidge of circumstantial evidence doesn't cut it. You need facts. And the fact is that there was no evidence that proved Harper Martini killed anyone. And you all know why, because Harper Martini had everything to lose and nothing to gain. Now, before we go any further, I want to make something crystal clear. The defense has no burden in today's case. I didn't have to stand up here and start talking to you. Miss Martini didn't have to get up on the stand and testify. In fact, after Dr. Kwan finished with his testimony, we could have asked you for a verdict. But we didn't. Because Miss Martini wants you all to know what really happened. Miss Martini wants you to know the truth. And the truth is, ladies and gentlemen, this is simply a case of a loving mother trying to make peace with her daughter's fiance. Now, no one here is under the illusion that Genesis Petrillo and Harper Martini got along. They didn't. Miss Martini herself admits that, but you heard that she was trying. You heard that she made a special bottle of wine that she heard Genesis would love. Now, she gave Genesis that wine. Genesis drank the wine and unfortunately passed away. That wine may have had some pesticide in it, but it wasn't Harper Martini who put them there. You heard from Austin Lewis, the head winemaker at Peony Estates, that they had a lot of pest problems and that they used a lot of pesticide in order to deal with that. That's not all you heard from the winemaker. The winemaker told you that they were operating on razor-thin margins and that they wanted to spray pesticides as fast and cheaply as possible. Now, we can't tell you exactly how that bottle of wine was contaminated. We don't know if maybe the grapes were contaminated in the production. The aging cask may have had some pesticide in it, or someone was spraying where there were open bottles that later held wine. We don't know. But I want you to hear me when I say this. We don't have to. The defense has no burden. The plaintiff's job was to show you exactly how that pesticide got into that wine. And ladies and gentlemen, they didn't. And that's not all the plaintiff had to prove to you. The plaintiff had to prove three things to you by a preponderance of the evidence, meaning more likely than not. They had to prove that Harper Martini intentionally poisoned that bottle of wine, that Miss Martini intended to cause Genesis Petrillo harm with that poisoning, and they also had to prove that Miss Martini's specific action was the cause of the harm that Mr. Petrillo suffered. I want to talk about what they did to try and prove that to you. They called Angel Rodriguez Genesis's best friend, but I want you to think about what she told all of you. She told you that Genesis and Harper didn't get along. But that's about it. She didn't tell you that Harper poisoned the wine. She didn't tell you that Harper wanted that wine to hurt Genesis. Didn't fulfill any of the elements they had to prove. Then they called Sam Arnold, and think about what that caterer told you. Again, he told you that Genesis Petrillo and Harper Martini didn't get along, that he saw pesticides near a wine bottle. That doesn't prove that Harper Martini poisoned the wine. He didn't see that. That doesn't prove that Miss Martini intended that poison to harm Genesis Petrillo. He certainly didn't see that. And Sam Arnold, the caterer, couldn't tell you what actually caused Genesis Petrillo's death. Lastly, they called Dr. Kwan to the stand, and that doctor essentially told you one thing. He told you that Genesis Petrillo probably died from pesticide poisoning. And you know what? We agree. But that's not an element of the claim that the plaintiff has brought against Miss Martini. I want you to think about what the plaintiff wants you to believe about Harper Martini. They want you to believe that she's a cold-blooded killer that was willing to sacrifice her business, her relationship with her only child, and her reputation. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to think about what else we heard today. We heard that Miss Martini didn't stop anyone else from trying to drink the wine. I mean, you heard from Angel Rodriguez that Genesis offered it to everyone at the wedding party. Harper Martini was sitting at that table and said nothing. The plaintiff didn't bring you a single thing that can prove their charge by a preponderance of the evidence. And ladies and gentlemen, I want you to think about that charge and what it means. It means that they had to prove that their story was more likely than not to have happened, more likely than all other possible scenarios combined. They didn't do that today, ladies and gentlemen. No one here thinks that what happened is anything less than a tragedy. And when a tragedy happens, we want to find someone to blame. We want to get justice for what happened. But sometimes a tragedy is just a tragedy. There was no plot. No one wanted this to happen. But it did. Now, in just a moment, you're all going to go back to that jury deliberation room and decide on a verdict. That's your job and your responsibility alone. The judge, with all his power, can't decide. I can't do anything to decide. All I can do is stand up here and tell you what happened. And at this point, you all know Harper Martini had everything to lose and nothing to gain. Find her not liable. Thank you.
Thank you. Is the plaintiff doing rebuttal?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, you may proceed.
Ladies and gentlemen, I will keep this short. Harper Martini is liable of battery. I agree with Mr. Jones that this is a tragedy and this is real life, not a story. And as such, I would ask that you get justice for Genesis Petrillo. Ladies and gentlemen, we've met our burden of proof here today, and there's only one reasonable verdict that you can come to. Find Harper Martini liable of battery. Thank you.
All right, folks. Take a deep breath. Good round for everyone. I'm asked to remind the scoring judges to submit their ballots and then email or text the competition committee and include your courtroom number, which we are courtroom 1, I believe, and let them know that the ballots have been submitted. Once the ballots have been received and the tournament staff lets you know that they've received it, we'll do some brief oral comments and then we can sign off. So if you'll let me know, Ms. Both and Mr. Cole, when you've received confirmation your ballots have been received, we'll start with the comments.
We'll do it. Thank you.
My ballot is submitted and it's been confirmed.
I'm having trouble finding my ballot. Where is it?
Should be a link in the email.
That's what I'm looking at.
On mine, it shows to be a blue link, a hyperlink on the email.
Yeah, from this morning.
Yes, sir. Actually, not from this morning, probably from right when this round started.
Okay. At 10:06, that's what I'm looking at. I got a bench book link, comments link.
The link that has your entry to the room, the way you got into the room, that email, it has me listed as presiding judge and Miss Both and yourself, and then under your name it should say ballot and it's in blue.
Okay. Got it.
Great.
All right, Mr. Cole, this is Elliot. I'm with the tournament staff. I just want to make sure you were able to find your ballot.
Yeah.
All right, great. Thank you. Just either you can let me know or have one of the other judges let me know once it's been submitted, and then I'll give you the all clear.
Okay.
The tab room says our ballots are in and good.
Where do I find the ballot code?
Oh, you
I'm
don't
sorry?
need that.
So are we good?
Fix it as soon as I can get this thing submitted. Trying to get it out. Yeah, I'm good.
They got
Okay.
it. They got it.
All right, great. If I could have everyone back on real quick. We're going to keep the comments really brief. I know you guys have another round in about an hour or 15 minutes, hour and 15 or so to go. So I know you guys want to probably grab some food and get ready and prepped. So Mr. Cole or Ms. Voth, do you want to give any brief comments?
Go ahead, Ms. Voth.
Sure, I'll be really brief. I did mock trial all through college. I'm a 2L at Pepperdine Law right now. I do mock trial in law school as well. So I know sitting through these comments is the worst thing ever. So I'll be super, super brief. I would just say when you make your objections, make them really brief. Just be objection hearsay, and then let the other side respond. And then the second thing is in this Zoom trial format, the more visuals you can use, the better.
I've got to say, I'm an old guy, very old guy. I was in one of the very first moot court competitions at Baylor as my third year, and what I have seen today has been most impressive. Judge Vick, you did a marvelous job, and there's not the contestants, the witnesses. I'm just telling you, I'm pretty much overwhelmed because it's clear how much time and effort you folks have put into this, and I'm delighted to have been involved.
Thank you for the compliment. I will say, my brief comments are this: the quality of the witnesses across the board was amazing today. I don't know that I've seen a round that the witnesses were as consistently good from witness to witness. I kept thinking, well, there's got to be a let up, but every witness did a great job playing their part and understanding their part. I will kind of echo Ms. Voth's comments, though. As far as the attorneys go, quality presentation, did a great job, but I don't think you do need to cite and recite the whole rule to me. It's more important, perhaps, just to make the objection and let the other side see if they have a response. But to that extent, I was pleased to see that the attorneys didn't over object. There were definitely plenty of opportunities to object, and I think in these competitions, there's a tendency to want to object to everything. And you guys did a very good job of showing restraint and only objecting when it was necessary and you felt like you had a point to make. So I was very impressed all across the board. And I wish both teams the best of luck in the future, and we'll see y'all when we see you.
Yeah, well done.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thank